I thought losing my father would be the worst day of my life. I was wrong, because less than 48 hours after we buried him, my stepmother handed me a suitcase and told me to leave the house. No warning, no discussion, no sympathy. Just a suitcase and a cold stare. At the time, I thought she was being cruel. I thought grief had somehow turned her into a different person. But years later, when I looked back on that moment, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't acting out of anger, she was acting out of fear. And the reason she was afraid had everything to do with a secret my father had hidden before he died. A secret that would eventually tear my family apart. And it all started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. 29 days after being thrown out, my phone rang. The man on the other end said he was my father's lawyer. Then he told me something that made my blood run cold. My father knew this was going to happen. He knew they would force me out. He knew they would try to take everything. And before he died, he left behind a way to stop them. What I discovered over the next few weeks exposed lies, betrayal, forged documents, and a family secret that had been hidden for more than 20 years. Looking back now, I understand why they wanted me gone so badly. Because the longer I stayed away, the better their chances of keeping the truth buried forever. My name is Emily, and before I tell you what the lawyer said, you need to understand something about my family, because none of this started when my father died. It started years earlier. My mother passed away when I was 7. After that, it was just me and my father. We didn't have much money, but we had each other. Dad packed my lunches, helped me with homework, sat through every school play, every parent meeting, every birthday. He wasn't perfect, but he never let me doubt that I was loved. Then, when I was 14, he met Linda. At first, she seemed wonderful. She was warm, friendly, and always smiling. When Dad announced they were getting married, I was genuinely happy for him. For a while, everything felt normal. But after the wedding, small things started changing. The changes were so subtle that I almost ignored them. Conversation stopped whenever I entered a room. Linda suddenly became very interested in Dad's finances. Her sons, Jason and Mark, started visiting more often. Sometimes I'd come home and find them inside Dad's office going through paperwork. Whenever I asked what they were doing, they'd laugh it off, but something never felt right. One night, I woke up thirsty and went downstairs for water. As I walked past Dad's office, I heard voices. The door wasn't fully closed. Linda sounded frustrated. "She doesn't need to know," Dad answered immediately. "That decision isn't yours to make." A long silence followed. Then Linda said something that stayed with me for years. "One day you're going to regret this." I hurried upstairs before they noticed me. At the time, I didn't know what they were discussing, but I never forgot those words. Over the next few years, the tension inside the house grew. Jason and Mark treated me politely whenever Dad was around, but when he wasn't, they barely acknowledged me. Sometimes I felt like a stranger living in my own home. The older I got, the more distant Linda became. Then something strange happened 6 months before Dad died. One evening, he called me into his office. He looked nervous, not scared, just distracted, like something was weighing heavily on his mind. He opened a drawer and handed me an old brass key. I stared at it. "What is this for?" He smiled. "The less you know right now, the safer you'll be." I laughed. I thought he was joking. But he wasn't laughing. Then he said something that made no sense at the time. If anything ever happens to me, don't let anyone convince you that you're alone. I remember feeling uncomfortable. I told him he was being dramatic. He smiled and changed the subject. That was the last serious conversation we ever had. 3 weeks later, my father died. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Heart attack. That's what the doctor said. One moment, he was alive. The next, he was gone. The shock was unbearable. Nothing prepares you for losing someone who has been your entire world. The funeral took place 4 days later. Hundreds of people attended. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, people whose lives Dad had touched. Everyone seemed devastated. Everyone except Linda. That bothered me. She wasn't crying. Neither were Jason or Mark. Instead, they seemed distracted, nervous, as if they were waiting for something. During the reception, after the funeral, I caught them whispering together several times. Every time they noticed me looking, they immediately stopped talking. I told myself, grief affects people differently. I wanted to believe that. 2 days later, I learned the truth. I was sitting in my bedroom looking through old family photos when Linda knocked on the door. Jason and Mark stood behind her. The second I saw their expressions, I knew something was wrong. Linda walked inside and placed a suitcase on my bed. I looked at it, then at her. "What is this?" Her answer changed everything. "You need to leave." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She handed me a stack of documents. According to those papers, Dad had left nearly everything to her. The house, the savings, the investments, everything. My name was barely mentioned. I couldn't believe it. Dad would never do that. Never. But Linda didn't care what I believed. She told me I had until sunset to move out. I argued. I cried. I begged. Nothing worked. By evening, I was standing outside with a suitcase and nowhere to go. As the front door closed, I noticed Jason smiling. Not a sad smile, not a nervous smile, a victorious smile. And for the first time, I realized this had been planned. The next month was one of the hardest periods of my life. A friend let me stay in her spare room. I spent my days applying for jobs and my nights wondering why my father had abandoned me. The thought haunted me. Then I remembered the key, the brass key Dad had given me. I kept it in my purse. Sometimes I would take it out and stare at it, trying to understand why he had trusted me with it. Then, 29 days after being thrown out, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. For some reason, I answered. "Emily Parker?" "Yes." "My name is Richard Hale. I'm your father's attorney." My stomach dropped. Attorney? Dad had never mentioned an attorney. The man continued. "Your father instructed me to contact you 30 days after his death." I froze. "What?" "He left specific instructions." I could barely think. The lawyer asked me to meet him the next morning. When I arrived, he immediately asked whether I was still living at the house. When I explained what happened, his expression darkened. Then he opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front, in my father's handwriting. Inside was a letter. The first sentence made my heart stop. "Emily, if you're reading this, then events unfolded exactly as I feared they would." I read it again. And again. Dad had expected this. He knew they would force me out. The letter contained an address and one instruction. "Bring the key." The address belonged to a private bank. An hour later, I found myself standing inside a secure vault room. The brass key fit perfectly into a safety deposit box. As the door opened, my heart pounded. Inside wasn't money or jewelry. It was something far more valuable. Documents, photographs, bank records, a flash drive, and another handwritten letter. The flash drive contained a video. When I pressed play, my father appeared on the screen, alive, smiling. For a moment, I forgot he was gone. Then he started talking. Emily, if you're watching this, then I wasn't able to protect you the way I hoped. Tears filled my eyes. Dad explained that for nearly 2 years, he had suspected someone inside the family was manipulating financial records. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Then he found evidence, signatures forged on documents, money moved without permission, files copied from his office. The deeper he investigated, the worse things became. Eventually, he discovered who was responsible. Jason, Mark, and Linda. The three of them had been working together, preparing for the day he died, preparing to take everything. But that wasn't the biggest secret. The biggest secret came from the photographs inside the box. Old photographs, very old photographs. Pictures of my mother, pictures of Dad, pictures of a small child. A child I had never seen before. Attached to the photos was a birth certificate and a DNA report. My hand started shaking because the child wasn't a stranger. It was Jason. The documents revealed something unbelievable. Jason wasn't Linda's son from a previous marriage. He was my father's biological son, a son he had hidden from everyone for more than 20 years. Before meeting my mother, Dad had briefly dated Linda. She became pregnant. The relationship ended. Years later, after my mother's death, Linda reappeared. Not by accident. She came back because she knew the truth, and for years she had used that secret to stay close to him. According to Dad's letter, he planned to tell me everything, but he never got the chance. The final pages contained evidence that Linda and her sons had forged legal documents in an attempt to seize the estate before the truth could emerge. The lawyer immediately turned everything over to investigators. The investigation lasted months. Every week new evidence appeared: forged signatures, fake wills, unauthorized transfers, hidden accounts. The case eventually went to court. And when all the evidence was presented, the outcome was devastating for them. Every fraudulent document was invalidated. Every transfer was reversed. The fake will was thrown out completely. The inheritance returned to its rightful structure. And for the first time, the entire truth became public. But there was one final surprise. One final secret Dad had hidden. Most of his wealth had never been inside the house or his bank accounts. Years earlier, he had created a trust designed specifically to protect me. And because of the conditions attached to it, Linda and her sons had no legal access to any of it. Their entire plan had failed before it even began. Everything they had done, every lie, every forgery, every betrayal, it had all been for nothing. Months later, I returned to the house. Not because I wanted the property, but because it was the last place that still felt connected to my father. One evening, I sat alone in his office and opened the final letter he had left behind. Inside was a single paragraph. Emily, if you've reached this point, then you've found the truth. I know the road wasn't easy. I know you've been hurt. But never measure your worth by what others tried to take from you. Measure it by the strength that carried you through it. Some people leave money behind. Some leave property. What I hope I've left you is courage. because courage is the one thing nobody can steal. I must have read those words 100 times. For the first time since his death, I cried. Not because I was angry, not because I was grieving, but because I finally understood. My father knew he might not be there to protect me forever. So he created a way to protect me even after he was gone. And somehow, despite everything that happened, he kept his promise. The promise he made when I was a little girl. The promise that no matter what happened, I would never have to face the world alone. The promise he made when I was a little girl. The promise that no matter what happened, I would never have to face the world alone. And maybe that's why I'm sharing this story today. Because sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we trust the most. And sometimes the truth stays hidden for years, until one small moment changes everything. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you of one thing. Never underestimate your worth. Never stop searching for the truth. And never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you enjoy real-life stories filled with secrets, betrayal, shocking twists, and emotional journeys, just like this one, make sure to subscribe to Secrets Unwhispered and turn on notifications, because the next story might leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, some secrets refuse to stay buried forever.